Are you ready to transform your summer into an epic splash-tastic adventure? Say goodbye to wasteful, single-use water balloons and hello to the ultimate in reusable, eco-friendly fun with reusable water balloons. Check out the link in the video description to get yours on Amazon today.
Australians struggling with the cost of living crisis really are worse off than most other workers in the world, new OECD figures show. The cost of living crisis is particularly bad in Australia because wages had lagged behind inflation for 3 years. The OECD calculated that Australian real wages in the March quarter of 2024 were 4.8% weaker than they were at the end of 2019, shortly before the COVID-19 pandemic. This is one of the largest drops in real wages among OECD countries, it said. Real wages grew in 2024 for the first time in nearly 3 years. But households are still facing pressure under the cost of living crisis. This made Australian workers even worse off than their rich world counterparts in Spain, Germany, and the United States, where wages have also fallen in real terms adjusted for inflation. Real wages are now growing year on year in most OECD countries, in the context of declining inflation, the OECD said. They are, however, still below their 2019 level in many countries. Australian wages lagged behind inflation from the June quarter of 2021 as Sydney went into lockdown until the March quarter of 2024. This meant Australian workers effectively suffered a pay cut for 3 years. Inflation is now at 3.6% compared with 4.1% for wages, but the real wage increase of 0.5% is still rather weak in the face of higher rents, petrol and electricity prices. After years of flat or falling wages growth, the OECD said a 1970s-style wage price spiral was unlikely. As real wages are recovering some of the lost ground, profits are beginning to buffer some of the increase in labor costs, it said. In many countries, there is room for profits to absorb further wage increases, especially as there are no signs of a price-wage spiral. Australia's lowest-paid workers are hardly much better off than they were 5 years ago, despite some big increases in the minimum wage. Adjusted for inflation, the real minimum wage is only 2.3% higher than it was in 2019, which was well below the 8.3% median increase across the OECD. Australia's 2.7 million workers either on the national minimum wage or awards received a 3.75% pay rise on July 1, which was only marginally above the 3.6% inflation rate. This took the full-time minimum wage to $47,627, which is still only half Australia's average full-time salary of $98,218. Unemployment is still low at 4%, and the OECD predicted it would only rise to 4.3% by the end of 2025. This would still be below the OECD average of 4.9%. Labor market tightness keeps easing, but remains generally elevated, the OECD said. OST Secretary-General Matthias Cormann resigned as Australia's Liberal Finance Minister in October 2020 and began a 6-year term in Paris in June 2021.